Welcome to this week's movement breakdown on the overhead squat. Grab your PVC pipe or your broomstick and follow along. This week's movement is going to be the overhead squat. Overhead squat demands and develops a lot of functional flexibility. It's going to really depend on your squatting mechanics. So if your air squat and front squat are not very good, your overhead squat's usually going to suffer or be a little bit worse. So we need to have a really solid foundation of both the front squat and the air squat in order to attempt a good overhead squat. Load is going to really amplify faults in any of the positions. So go back to that first movement breakdown we did on the air squat. If you don't feel like it's up to par yet, work on the air squat before we jump into the overhead squat, which is going to really be a lot more demanding. We're not going to get into the points of performance of the overhead squat because CrossFit does this. It's one of the 9 foundational movements of CrossFit, and they did a really nice video not too long ago emphasizing those points. So I'll link that in the description if you guys want to check out that video. It's about a minute and a half long. What we would like to talk about today are going to be some faults and some fixes and how to work on developing that overhead squat. I want you guys to start with a PVC pipe. PVC pipe is going to be unweighted. It's going to allow you to focus on where the bar is in space. And we're going to start with a pass-through. So take a wide grip on the pipe. We're going to trace as big a circle as we can. So think about pushing it away from your body. And I want you to be able to do this at the top of the movement, the bottom of the movement, and even somewhere in between. Once we are comfortable with the pass-through at all those different locations, we're going to try and lock this into the frontal plane. So the cue I like to give is to show me your armpits. What I'm trying to cue is to rotate that armpit forward and kind of pull that humerus back into the socket. A lot of times as we squat, that armpit has a tendency to rotate outward, so focus on keeping it facing forward. Once we have the frontal plane, we're going to get that bar locked in. We will start descending. We want the bar to stay over your foot for the entirety of the movement. So focus on keeping it in the right spot. Start slowly. So pull those hips down, start pushing the knees out hard, and think about spreading the floor apart with your feet. As we descend, we want to try and get to a position of the hip crease below the kneecap, and we'll stand back up to complete the movement. Increase the load on this by starting with a 2.5 pound plate. So slide a 2.5 pound plate onto your PVC pipe, and then go to 5 pound plate, and then maybe 7.5, and work your way up to a 15 pound training bar. Once we're at the 15 pound bar, hopefully those mechanics are a little bit more sound and we can jump to the bigger bar without much of an issue. As we get better at overhead squat, it should converge with your back squat and your front squat, so those numbers should get closer together as you get better at it. So where do the faults for the overhead squat come from? They're going to come from 2 main places, probably awareness or probably flexibility. Awareness is just knowing where your body is or where the bar is in space. You might be squatting and the bar drifts back a little, and the correction is just going to be to move it back. Flexibility is going to be the other issue. If you are not mobile in your hamstrings, your glutes, your ankles, your shoulders, we could have a whole host of problems come up. We could see your chest drop during the squat. We could see the bar slide forward as we squat. We could see us not hit depth. We could see our heels come off the ground. These are all related to flexibility. The easiest thing we can do to fix some of the awareness faults is to slow down. Slowing down is going to give you an opportunity to try and focus on positions. If just slowing down is not helping, we usually need to give you a little bit of a tactile cue. We like to do this with the wall squat, which we discussed earlier in the air squat movement breakdown, and here's another example of that. Or using like a door frame. We could use our PVC pipe, hold it in both hands, try and set up in a really good squat position with our feet right in the middle of the door frame and descend down into that squat. That door frame should give you a more tactile or physical feedback as to where that bar is in space during the movement. As far as pre-workout mobility goes, we definitely want to hit the hips, the ankles, the hamstrings, the shoulders, and probably a little bit of thoracic extension. Thoracic is going to be that mid to upper back, so below the neck and above the lumbar, and we want to try and get a little bit more extension. So using a roller and finding a pivot point and trying to extend over that roller will usually help you get into a little bit more upright position at the bottom. But hit your lizard stretch, hit your Samson stretch, hit your ankle stretch, hit your shoulders, and try and open up as much as you can before the movement. As we're doing the overhead squat with really light weight, we want to continue to fight for position. So It's gonna be taxing, it's gonna be a little bit uncomfortable, but you need to try and keep your chest up, you need to try and keep those armpits forward. We wanna be able to work on these mobility pieces following our workout. So when we're gonna create that long-lasting change is gonna be after we're warmed up and after those muscles have worked, we can try and then create some length by working on them for 4 to 5 minutes per movement. One last fix, the quick fix is gonna be weightlifting shoes. Weightlifting shoes are going to simulate a little bit of hamstring and a little bit of ankle flexibility. If you have weightlifting shoes and you can wear those for an overhead squat or practically any squatting movement, it's gonna make the squat at the bottom feel a little bit more comfortable. So overhead squat day would be a good day to try out those new weightlifting shoes. Up until this point, we've been talking about the overhead squat with a barbell. We could also do a single arm overhead squat. The single arm overhead squat is gonna be a lot more demanding as far as your positions are concerned. That narrow grip does not allow for much room for error, so if you are tight in the shoulders, the hips, or the ankles, it's gonna really expose that during the single arm squat. For the single arm squat, your arm needs to stay right next to your head, and again, that weight needs to stay in the frontal plane, so over your center of support, over your feet. Weightlifting shoes will help you during the single arm overhead squat as well. It's gonna simulate a little bit of ankle flexibility and a little bit of hamstring flexibility. So if you have them, wear them for the single arm overhead squat. In some ways, that single arm overhead squat is gonna be great for us to practice right now. A lot of us don't have access to the barbell and we can't practice a weighted overhead squat with a barbell and plates, but a lot of us have kettlebells and dumbbells. It would not be a bad strength component to work into your routine. In some ways, a single arm overhead squat might be a little bit more functional because you have this free hand you can do whatever you want with during the movement. So think of ways that you can incorporate that single arm overhead squat into your routine, and hopefully by the end of quarantine, we'll have a slightly improved squat. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's movement breakdown on the overhead squat and the single arm overhead squat. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for weekly movement breakdown videos and daily workout of the day videos to help you keep fit during quarantine. Thanks, we'll see you next time.